1 out of 2 women and 1 out of 4 men over the age of 50 will break a bone at some point during their lifetime due to osteoporosis. These bone breaks, often resulting from slips and falls, can cause life-threatening complications and permanent disabilities. As a result of the limited mobility and the loss of independence, depression can often set in. Even if you feel like you're on a great path and you're young enough that you aren't concerned, there's a 50% chance that your mom or grandma will break a bone from osteoporosis, and a 25% chance your dad or grandpa will. So listen carefully today and share this podcast with everybody that you care about, especially those closest to you. Welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast, where we provide education and inspiration to help guide you on your journey to look better, feel better, and most importantly, heal better. Hello, and welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Kevin Schultz, and today we're going to talk about osteoporosis. Over 50 million people in the U.S. have osteoporosis, and the rate increases dramatically with age to the point where 70%, 7 out of 10 people over the age of 80 have osteoporosis. The biggest group affected, of course, is women, and on average, a woman loses 20% of her bone mass during menopause. The key word there is average. On average, a woman loses 20% of her bone mass during menopause. So if the key word is average, the big question, if you're a critical thinker, should be, well, why do some women lose almost no bone mass, we know, and then others lose way more than 20%, sometimes 30%, 40%. So I wish I could say it's just a really simple answer. The answer, as is the case with most things, is not simple. There are many different factors. We know that genetics play a role. We know that medications, the type or how long you're taking them plays a role. Underlying conditions like autoimmune disorders play a huge role. Your gut health plays a huge role. And the list goes on and on and on. But the great news is the research tells us that lifestyle is the biggest factor. And of course, the reason that's great news is because what do we know about lifestyle? It's controllable, it's modifiable. So it's something that you can change. So today, you're going to learn how to avoid, how to improve, and even reverse osteoporosis. And I know that's a big one because most people are told you cannot reverse it. We'll talk about that. Avoid, improve, reverse osteoporosis through things like eating the right foods, taking the right supplements, doing the right exercises, that modifiable, changeable lifestyle. But first, let's start with the basics. What is osteoporosis? Osteoporosis, by definition, literally means porous bone. Osteo means bone, porosis means porous. So osteoporosis means porous bone, and we know that with osteoporosis, you can have porous bone from one of two things or really both of those things. And so number one would be a lack of production of bone. So if you have a lack of production of bones, what it means is that you have a lack of the proper building blocks in your body. So we'll talk about that today. What are those building blocks that you need? And then a loss of bone. And loss of bone, there can be a bunch of different factors. We know that the top two, according to the medical literature, is hormonal imbalance, especially estrogen with menopause. And then also, number 2 is medications. Prescription medications are the number 2 cause of bone loss in people with osteoporosis. You may have heard the term or even had the diagnosis osteopenia. Osteopenia just means decreased bone. So you haven't gotten to the point yet where you can qualify as an osteoporosis diagnosis, but you have a loss of bone mass that shows up either on an x-ray. It's pretty hard to detect with that, but typically on something like a DEXA scan where it's looking at the bone mineral density. And if you have that diagnosis, then it should be a huge, huge wake-up call. Thank God you don't have osteoporosis yet, but we know that osteopenia is so easily reversible, so easily improvable. So all of the things that I talk about today, whether you have full-blown osteoporosis or you have osteopenia or you don't have it at all, it's still going to apply to anyone regardless where you're at in life, regardless if you're a man or you're a woman. So osteoporosis is often referred to as a silent disease, as are so many, cancer and heart disease and so many others. And the reason that osteoporosis and so many others are called a silent disease is, number one, they take many years to develop. So it's not something that just happens to you. It's something that happens within you, often from lifestyle, and it happens over many years. So it takes many years to develop. And it's silent, meaning that there's often no obvious symptoms related to it at all. So it's not like you feel your bones becoming more porous, typically. It's not like you feel any of those symptoms developing, the osteoporosis building in your body. But then when it does result in symptoms, as it gets to its later stages, typically it would be something like a loss of height. So most people think of loss of height as just, oh, that's something that happens with age, and it is, but it's something that happens with the accumulation of age and often is correlated with osteoporosis. And the reason that you get a loss of height, and especially loss of height from the spine where most of it takes place, is due to microfractures that take place. Those bones get so porous, they get so weak, you get microfractures, and as a result, it causes that loss of height. And a lot of that comes from what's called the dowager's hump, or that hunched forward posture, because the bones in the upper back get so weakened, microfractures, and the spine moves further and further backwards as the head moves forward. And then, of course, the most obvious symptom is fractures. And so with fractures, we know that the three primary areas are hip fractures, wrist fractures, and spinal fractures. And with hip fractures, they're all scary, of course, but with hip fractures, we know that for somebody over the age of 65, when they fracture their hip, there's a 20% chance death rate in the next year. So osteoporosis in and of itself doesn't kill people, but the fractures that result from it absolutely can, again, at a 20% rate. 1 out of 5 people that break a hip over the age of 65 die within 1 year of fracturing their hip. So pretty important stuff that we're talking about. Some of the causes and the risk factors that we know that will dramatically increase the causes of osteoporosis, and this goes back to what I talked about earlier with the averages. So why do some people lose 20%? Why do some people lose 5%? Why do some people lose 40%? And it's due to things like inactivity, for example. We know that bones, like so many things in the body, like our muscles, for example, require resistance. They require a stimulus. So somebody that is a couch potato at home, that also sits in an office chair all day long at work, or a truck driver that's very inactive even when he's not driving his truck, we know that that inactivity dramatically increases your chances of osteoporosis due to the lack of stimulus on your bones. Hormonal changes and hormonal imbalances are absolutely huge when it comes to osteoporosis. Low estrogen from menopause in women is far and away the number one cause, and we know that osteoporosis affects women much greater than what it affects men. And low estrogen is the primary cause of that. When there's an imbalance in the hormones from estrogen dropping so low, osteoporosis rates skyrocket. And then with men, it's testosterone rates lowering. And obviously, men aren't going through anything like menopause. So low testosterone in men, so changeable, so modifiable. And we know that the more inactive a man becomes and the worse their diet is, the closer they are to that standard American ultra-processed food diet, testosterone rates drop rapidly. And guess what? Testosterone rates climb when people change their nutrition to a whole food diet and they incorporate resistance training especially, but activity in general. I don't want you to lose sight of these things are very changeable, very modifiable. Change your lifestyle, and you don't have to just say, oh, osteoporosis happens to almost everyone, so it's likely going to happen to me. We also know that medication use plays a huge role. So according to the medical literature, the drugs that cause the most bone loss are acid reflux drugs. Well, why does an acid reflux drug cause bone loss? If you listen to, I think it was 2 podcasts ago now on cardiovascular disease and cholesterol, I talked about how cholesterol prescriptions, those statin drugs, are based on a myth. They're not based on science. And you'll find this is often the case with so many drugs. Good idea that it started with, but we now know from science that it's just not true. So an acid reflux drug was created because of the thought that, oh, if somebody has acid reflux, which means there's acid coming up their esophagus causing this burning sensation, they must be producing too much acid. Well, we now know that's not the case. We now know that acid reflux is actually the polar opposite of that, and it comes from a reduction in acid production in the body. So your stomach isn't producing enough acid. As a result of that, then the flap on the top of the stomach doesn't close properly because it doesn't get the proper signals, and that limited acid is able to come up into the esophagus, causing acid reflux and that burning sensation. Now we go back to the drug. What does the drug do? The drug limits something that's already limited. So it's reducing the acid production when you already have an acid production problem. And stomach acid is there to break down food so you can properly absorb the nutrients in your intestinal tract. That's how the digestive system works. So what do you think happens if you have a very limited amount of stomach acid? Well, you don't break down foods properly, and as a result of that, you don't absorb the nutrients, and that is why acid reflux drugs lead to so many side effects, and one of them being a bone loss side effect because you don't have the proper nutrients to produce bone in the first place. The second on that list is antidepressants. We know that antidepressants dramatically lower bone in people. It causes increases in bone loss. Cancer drugs, certain cancer drugs also decrease bone loss, increase bone loss rather. Birth control drugs are absolutely huge, and the younger a woman is on a birth control drug when they're an adolescent, it causes hugely detrimental effects later in life for increased rates of osteoporosis. And then steroids, this is a huge one. So corticosteroids, to be specific, and things like prednisone, we know that even with 3 months of prednisone use, you have a dramatic increase in bone loss and chances of developing osteoporosis. Other things are low D3 levels. So D3, this is one that is so easily changeable and easy to address. So number 1, get tested. Find out where your D3 levels are at. Those D3 levels, ideally, you can ignore what it says on your test because it's based on what it takes to prevent rickets. Your D3 levels, according to the best independent literature out there, should be between 60 and 90. So you want to make sure it's the 25OH D3. Between 60 and 90 is where you want to be at for multiple reasons. The best way to raise D3 levels is get sunshine. So ideally 20 minutes of midday sun with as much skin exposed as possible. Obviously, if you live in climates like I do, where you have the winter months and you're not getting as much sunshine or it's too cold to get out there and get it, then supplementation is hugely important. But at a minimum, get tested, find out where your levels are at. We actually have a very simple, low-cost, at-home test kit that you can order on our website, foundationalhealth365.com. You click on Shop Brands and then on Nutridyne, and you're going to see a tab on there for test kits. Order that test kit, get tested, find out where your levels are at, and then you might find out they're great. You don't need to address it. Or if they're low, you know that for countless reasons and for the sake of this podcast, to help to prevent or reverse osteoporosis, you want to get those D3 levels up in that 60 to 90 range. The higher, the better. Nutrient deficiencies in general. So there's 5 big ones when it comes to bone loss. So you have calcium. That's the number one thing that most people think of. And then you have magnesium, you have phosphorus, you have D3, but then you also have something K2. And the D3 supplement that I recommend, which is also same place on our website, that is D3 plus K2. So whether you're taking the Nutridyne supplement or another one, you want to make sure that it's D3 plus K2, which is going to dramatically increase the absorption rates of the D3. But then also we know that those things like D3 and K2 need to be present for calcium absorption rates. And we know that magnesium needs to be present for proper calcium absorption rates. So that's why it's so important to get the right foods, to get the right supplements as well. Some of the other things that cause increases in osteoporosis, a really, really big one is sweetened beverages, especially soft drinks. So first of all, one of the reasons that soft drinks as a whole are so detrimental to our health is because of the high sugar content and no fiber content. So it's not just high sugar. So for instance, an orange and a banana has high sugar, but what do they also have? They have God-given natural fiber in there. And that fiber, what it does, one of its jobs is to absorb the sugar your body doesn't need so that you get rid of it through a bowel movement. Well, with a soft drink, with orange juice, any of those sweetened beverages that don't have fiber, apple juice for that matter, all these things that we think of like as being a health drink or good for our kids, all you're doing is drinking pretty much pure sugar, even when it's 100% fruit juice for that matter, because it doesn't have fiber. That high sugar content leads to high inflammation in the body. That high inflammation increases osteoporosis rates. Above and beyond that, when it comes to soft drinks have very high phosphorus content. The higher the phosphorus content, this causes calcium to be ripped out of the bones. You're literally robbing the bone of calcium when you're drinking soft drinks. So bare minimum, get rid of the soft drinks, limit those sweetened beverages dramatically. Other things are grain-fed red meats. Why grain-fed versus grass-fed? Well, a grain-fed we know is remarkably more inflammatory. So that grain-fed meat increases inflammation levels, especially when you're talking about highly processed meats like sandwich meats and bolognas and other things. They're not only grain-fed, but then they're also more inflammatory because of the other things that are added to it with nitrates and nitrites and all of the other processed junk that goes into it. And then what's often listed as the number one risk factor for osteoporosis, besides being a woman, is aging. Of course, aging is a factor because many things get worse as we age, right? But aging is the biggest factor, and the biggest reason that aging is the biggest factor is because of time, not just age. So I'm not suggesting age isn't a factor, but what I mean by that is it's the accumulation of all of the bad lifestyle habits over time that are the biggest factor, not just age in and of itself. If you just look at the example of why does one person make it to the age of 70 with no signs of osteoporosis, in fact, incredible bone health, and then the next person ends up with severe osteoporosis. Certainly, those other things that we talked about, the underlying conditions, the medications, all play a role, but a huge role, and number one, according to the literature, is lifestyle. So how do you diagnose osteoporosis? Most people that have gone through this or are nearing the age where you need to go through it, DEXA scan is the primary way to do it, and it's really the only way to truly diagnose and tell where you're at and get an actual score. And a DEXA scan is looking at bone mineral density throughout the bone in the hips, the spine, the forearms, the wrists, fingers, as well as the heels. So you're looking at what does your bone mineral density look like, and then from there, ideally, you're going to the next level. So let's say that you come back with a DEXA scan that shows you have mild osteoporosis, or even for that matter, severe osteoporosis. Now let's look at why that might be there. And that is where urine or blood tests come in. Now you can look for an underlying condition like an autoimmune disorder, which we know increases your chances. So that needs to be something you have to address. Otherwise, the odds of overcoming osteoporosis or improving it, for that matter, are pretty slim. And then nutrient deficiencies. So if you're looking at that D3, the K2, the phosphorus, the calcium, the magnesium, or other nutrient deficiencies, we know that that is incredibly important if you're really going to get to the underlying cause and address why you have osteoporosis in the first place. The conventional treatment, once you get that diagnosis, is typically looking at medications. Now, I will admit, over the last 10 years, this has improved dramatically. Not on the medication side, but above and beyond medication recommendations, it's really rare now that a medical doctor will not recommend lifestyle. So they're typically saying like, hey, here's your drug, but we also know that you need to incorporate some form of resistance training, walking more, you know that you need to improve your calcium or your nutrition. All of those things incredibly important. But if we look at the medication side of it, we know that those medications are they're unfortunately loaded with side effects, as so many medications are. So if we look at some of the top side effects, number one would be a severe loss of calcium. So think about that for a second. The lack of calcium is one of the primary, if not the primary reason for osteoporosis. And one of the side effects of an osteoporosis drug is a severe loss of calcium. One of the other side effects, or three for that matter, are bone, joint, and muscle pain. So the things that you're trying to improve, you're causing pain in those by taking this medication. This one's pretty crazy, but we know that a lot of these osteoporosis drugs come with warnings, and some of them even come with black box warnings because they cause a hollowing out of the femur and the jaw, and they can create spontaneous fractures in certain people. And the reason for that is because what these medications often do, it's not like they're providing nutrients to the body. They're not giving you bone stimulus through exercise and all of the things that we know that your body needs to produce bone. It's a medication that's tricking your body into doing something, and what it does often is it robs from one bone to feed another. So you might feel better about your DEXA scan because your hip score looks better, but at the same time, it might be hollowing out your femur or your jawbone. So it's out of my scope of practice to tell you to take or not take a medication, and I would never do that. But what I do strongly believe is that you have to be informed. You have to weigh the pros and cons. Talk to your doctor about your concerns, but also please do your own research. Your doctor is not going to sit down and go through all of the side effects and the pros and cons with you. And I don't think necessarily that they should have to. This should be something where you're doing your own research, you're coming to your own conclusions, and your conclusion might be, hey, my osteoporosis is severe, so yeah, I'm going to change my lifestyle, but I also want to be on the drug. Or it might be, I'm not changing anything lifestyle-wise, so I'm going to do the drug. That's not a right or wrong decision. You have to come to your own conclusions by weighing the pros and cons. But what I am suggesting is don't just take somebody else's opinion on it, and do not make your decision based on fear. Don't say, oh my gosh, I have osteoporosis. What do? I need to take the drug. Don't make your decision based on fear. Make your decision based on science, common sense, pros and cons, and what's right for you and your family. So let's get into the fun stuff. What are the things that you can do naturally to avoid, improve, and even at times, as I mentioned earlier, reverse osteoporosis. We know that when people incorporate the things that I'm going to talk about, in just 6 to 12 weeks, you can see sometimes dramatic improvements. Now, clearly, if somebody has full-blown osteoporosis as bad as it gets, you're not going to see dramatic improvements or reversal in 6 to 12 weeks. But if you have osteopenia or mild osteoporosis, absolutely, positively, if you change your lifestyle, you're looking at nutrient deficiencies, you can see dramatic improvements. And then you can even see reversal in 6 to 12 months. And obviously, again, that depends on the severity. And if you're severe osteoporosis, your scores are as bad as it gets, maybe you can't reverse it all the way. You can. Now, you can't according to the literature and if you Google online, but trust me, there are clinics that address this naturally. When people are fully bought into a program, they can absolutely reverse it no matter how severe it is. But even if you can't, worst case scenario, you can stop it in its tracks and you can improve it dramatically by changing your lifestyle. So we're going to start with exercise, and a little disclaimer here. So you obviously want to be smart. If you're somebody that's never worked out before, literally never done anything workout-wise, you don't even walk on a daily basis, I'm not suggesting you get off your couch and start trying to run on a treadmill or you start jumping up and down. So you want to be smart about whatever you're doing. And it's impossible for me to be exhaustive in a podcast and cover every scenario for each individual person. So I'm a big fan of people that have an osteoporosis or osteopenia diagnosis or somebody that just wants to be proactive about this. Hire a personal trainer. Tell them what you're dealing with. They're fantastic at that kind of stuff. So a personal trainer, group classes at gyms, and especially if you're older, group classes at senior centers are absolutely amazing for this kind of thing because the lifestyle aspect has been so readily now adopted by the medical profession. It is rare to find a senior center that's not going to have a specific class on osteoporosis that's addressing resistance training and the other important things that you need to do to help improve or overcome osteoporosis. So group classes are great. And for somebody that doesn't want a personal trainer, doesn't want to join a group class, just wants to do it on their own, YouTube is amazing. You can type into YouTube. In fact, I did this before the podcast today. I typed in osteoporosis exercises for beginners, osteoporosis exercises for senior women, osteoporosis exercises for young men. You can type in anything and you're going to find the right program for you. You might have to search a little bit, but find something that works for you. And ideally, you want to find something that incorporates things like resistance training and jump training. So resistance training, thankfully, is a pretty big part now of the medical literature and medical recommendations. Thankfully, due to some studies that came out of Australia, specifically called the Lift More program. So the Lift More program, LIFTMOR, is a program that incorporates resistance muscle training. And there are so many benefits to this. Above and beyond what we know for osteoporosis, they see that there's improved mood, reduced stress, reduced inflammation, increased muscle mass, improved balance and coordination and flexibility, and then, of course, increases in bone mass. So resistance training, working with bands, just body weight type stuff, dumbbells, barbells, machines, all of that is fantastic for improving osteoporosis. Ideally, you want to do that 3 days a week. Some is better than none, always. So if you're doing it 1 day a week for 10 minutes, that's better than doing nothing. But ideally, according to the research, and my recommendations would be 3 days per week, 30 minutes at least per session. Incorporating things like squats and a progression. I'm not going to go through a progression on all exercises, but a really good progression. If you've never done a squat before, focusing on doing a body weight squat. If you've never done even a body weight squat, which simply means just squatting down using no weight, just your body weight, then be safe about it. Put a chair behind you. So do a chair squat, or you're just dropping down till your butt touches the chair, standing back up, doing 10 to 20 repetitions of that a couple days a week. Moving further into now band squats, and then dumbbell squats and barbell squats. So this natural progression as you get more into it will become pretty obvious, especially if you're seeking out some extra advice from YouTube or classes or a personal trainer. Barbell and dumbbell presses for your chest and your shoulders are amazing osteoporosis exercises. Push-ups are fantastic. Doing deadlifts, whether it's with weights, bands, or dumbbells, are really, really great. Pull-ups, in fact, doing jumping pull-ups are amazing for osteoporosis. You're getting that bone stimulus in your legs with each jump. It helps you, of course, to be able to do a pull-up if you don't fully have the strength to do that. Those are all fantastic exercises, and really the best. So you want a mix of this. So all of the stuff I just talked about is resistance training, providing resistance to a muscle to help grow and strengthen that muscle, because of course muscles are attached to bones. The stronger muscles are, the stronger bones are. But then the best, according to the research, is doing jumping exercises and plyometrics. And this goes all the way back to what we talked about in the beginning, that a bone needs stimulus to grow. Jumping provides that stimulus. So there is a doctor that has done more research on this than anybody else on the planet. Her name is Dr. Stacy Sims. We'll have a link for this in the show notes. But if you want to Google it right now, Stacy Sims, S-I-M-S. So Dr. Stacy Sims has some amazing information, not only on osteoporosis and exercise, but she has published more than 100 papers in medical journals on women-specific health. So looking at things like, is fasting a great idea for women that like to exercise? What should nutrition look like while you're exercising and fasting and resistance training? Or if you have osteoporosis. So she has done just amazing work, and she's somebody that I highly recommend following if you're a woman. So Dr. Stacy Sims talks about things like jumping rope. Jumping rope is amazing for you. Well, if you can't jump rope, doing jumping jacks is also incredible. Step jacks. So if you can't do a jumping jack, a step jack is you're just stepping from side to side while you're doing that jumping jack motion. Jumping jacks happen to be my personal favorite. I do something on a daily basis. I call them exercise snacks. And so whether I'm doing paperwork or I've been working on my computer for a long period of time or just not moving enough in general, I do 50 rapid fire jumping jacks. I do this probably anywhere from 4 to 6, 7 times a day, where I do 50 jumping jacks as fast as I can, gets my heart rate up, stimulates bone growth, muscle growth, all of those amazing things. So jumping jacks are really, really good. Just simply jumping in place, jumping up and down, jumping side to side. Those are all great. If you have a mini rebounder, those are really, really good for improving bone health, improving muscle strength, balance, coordination. The list goes on and on. You can't go wrong by incorporating some jumping. Again, go back to that disclaimer at the beginning. Be smart about everything that you're doing. Always protect yourself. Obviously, if you're older, you have horrible balance, you don't want to jump on a mini trampoline and try to bounce up and down without having something that you're holding on to and supporting. So be smart about everything you're doing, but don't use it as an excuse to do nothing. Vibration platforms are also great. They stimulate bone growth, and you can use a vibration plate at home combined with doing body weight squats or dumbbell workouts while you're standing on that vibration plate. Good for bone growth as well as circulation and lymphatic flow and several other things. Moving on to nutrition. So nutrition, I'm going to highly recommend that if you have any digestive issues, that you start with the gut. Episode number 7 of my podcast, I talked about gut healing, gut health, a gut health protocol. The reason that I highly recommend that if you're dealing with anything gut-wise, digestive-wise, that you start there is because if you don't, you may start taking all of these great supplements, you change your food, but if you're not absorbing things properly, if you're not dealing with underlying issues from autoimmune disorders that are caused from the gut, then you're not going to reap the full benefits. So don't let it stop you. If you're not willing to do that, don't let it stop you from changing your nutrition. You're just going to get more bang for your buck without a doubt if you start with the gut and you listen to that episode number 7 podcast and incorporate those things. So when we're talking about nutrition, let's first talk about supplements. Going back to those 5 potential nutrient deficiencies that we talked about earlier, which, by the way, those nutrient deficiencies, when you're not deficient in them, those are the building blocks of bone. That's why they're so important. If you're deficient in them or even one of them, you don't have the proper building blocks to build bone. And you could be doing all the jumping exercises in the world. If you're missing the building blocks, you're not going to get the same results. So for supplements, we want to look at things like calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, D3, and K2. If we look at the best supplement for that, if you go on our website, click on Bone and Joint, on there you're going to see supplements for bone strength plus magnesium. So that is the best supplement that you're going to want to take to dramatically improve the chances of building bone because you're giving yourself all the proper nutrients. So the Bone Health Plus Magnesium. And then you're also going to want to take the D3 plus K2. There's D3 plus K2 5,000 IU. There's D3 plus K2 with 10,000 IU. This is where testing comes in. If you test your D3 levels through your MD or through the test kits on the Nutridyne portion of our website, that is where you're going to find out where are my levels and then what should I be taking for D3. If your levels are very low, you might need to take, according to a lot of the medical literature, up to 20,000 IU per day until you get it into adequate levels. If you're already at adequate levels, then doing 5,000 IU per day is adequate. Above and beyond supplements, if we look at food, I'm going to start with talking about one of the most overlooked things, especially when it comes to bone health. So if you read a lot of things online or you take the average advice, you're going to find that it's eating leafy greens, getting calcium-rich food. Calcium produces bone, and all of those things are true and they're very important, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But guess what 50% of your bone structure is? 50% of your bone structure is protein. So pretty important to get not only protein in your diet, but high quality protein. And we know that vegetarians that don't focus, for instance, on getting quality protein and don't supplement with it, that they have a higher incidence of osteoporosis. We know that if you're getting high quality protein, because it's 50% of the bone, we know that you're going to decrease your chances of osteoporosis or increase your chances of healing and improving osteoporosis. So I recommend a higher, this isn't even high, but it's a higher than what most people are used to, protein content on a daily basis. And that's getting anywhere from 1 to 1.25 grams of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So if you're 150 pounds, or if you're 250 pounds, but you're 100 pounds overweight, your ideal body weight is 150 pounds. That's what you want to shoot for with protein grams per day. So 1 gram, of course, per pound would be you're shooting for 150 grams of protein per day. Just like when I talk about drinking water, people are like, oh my gosh, that's so much. How do I do that? It adds up quickly throughout the day. If you're doing that gradually, for somebody like me, who if I'm eating 3 meals in a day, I'm shooting for 50 grams of protein per meal. And 50 grams of protein per meal really isn't that much when you look at how that breaks down and you're eating the right meats, the right eggs, the right things on a daily basis. So speaking of that, grass-fed meats, as I often talk about, is definitely the way that you want to go. Things like wild-caught fish, also absolutely fantastic. Pastured eggs and pastured poultry, really, really good for you. If we look at foods that are high in calcium and vitamin K, this is where we get into the leafy greens, things like broccoli, kale, and spinach, but also almonds and sardines are great for that. If we look at things that are high in magnesium, wild-caught Alaskan sockeye salmon, which we get, my family buys that at Costco. All of my kids love it. My wife and I absolutely love it. You can get frozen fillets of that wild-caught Alaskan sockeye salmon. In my opinion, some of the best fish, if not the best fish on the planet that you can buy, especially in a store. Avocados and bananas. Most people know that those things are high in magnesium. Excellent, excellent sources. Alkaline foods in general. Really everything that I've described is an alkaline food. But if we're looking at an alkaline or an anti-inflammatory diet, we're really talking about eating whole food. So you're eating whole food and you're getting a wide range of fruits and vegetables. Things like fresh herbs and spices, grapefruit, tomatoes, avocados, cucumbers, cabbage, celery. These are all fantastic anti-inflammatory, high alkalinity foods. Beets, watermelons, bananas again. All of these things are great. I could go on and on. Those are some of the really, really good ones. And then I think it's impossible to talk about nutrition and osteoporosis and calcium without talking about dairy. Now, if just drinking milk alone was enough, then we absolutely know that America, the US, would have the lowest osteoporosis rates because guess what we have? We have the highest milk consumption rates. This is a topic for an entirely different podcast where I will go into dairy in detail, but for today, I'll just stick with this. When you pasteurize and homogenize something that's already a bad product to begin with, meaning it's coming from antibiotic-fed cows and grain-fed cows, you do not in any way, shape, or form get a good or usable source of calcium. So here's what you want to do when you're looking at dairy. I always recommend 4 things that you're looking at. Those 4 things is it should always be organic, it should be 100% grass-fed, it should be full fat, and it should be plain. Those are the basic 4 things that you want to look at. Organic, 100% grass-fed, full fat, and plain. Some of the best sources are cheeses. 2 of my favorites are cheeses that are called Parmigiano Reggiano and Kerrygold cheese. What do both of these have in common? Well, actually, they have several things in common. Probably the most important one is you can get them both at Costco. So Parmigiano Reggiano, they have it in blocks at Costco. They have it in shredded little jars at Costco. And Parmigiano Reggiano comes from the Parmesan region of Italy. It is the original Parmesan cheese. It's actually the only legit Parmesan cheese on the planet. Believe it or not, when you're buying some of the Parmesan in a can like you get at Pizza Hut, where you're shaking that Parmesan crumbles or powder onto your pizza, guess what that also contains? Wood pulp. That's what cellulose is. So, and that's probably one of the better things that's in there. So Parmigiano Reggiano is actually a legitimate cheese from that region of Italy. If it's named that, it can't come from anywhere else. It's one of the best cheeses on the planet that you can eat. It's also high in things like K2, believe it or not. And then Kerrygold cheese, not only available at Costco, but it comes from Ireland. And both of those cheeses are from 100% grass-fed cows. They're not labeled organic, so a little warning here that not everything has to be labeled organic. If you know the product, like those 2, those are organic practices They don't have to label it organic because they're not using the antibiotics and the growth hormones and all of the other awful things that we have here in the US. So those, when it comes to cheeses, those are two of my favorites. Also, if you're getting organic fermented cheeses like blue cheeses, those are great sources of calcium as well. I'm a huge fan of, this is pronounced in many different ways depending on who you listen to. Most people, I think, pronounce it kefir. So kefir or kefir or kefir, that is an excellent fermented dairy product. My favorite brand that I've found, because it meets all of those four things, is a brand called Lifeway. And that Lifeway brand, I'm sure you can get it at many grocery stores. We personally, from where I'm from, we have grocery stores called Woodman's here in the Chippewa Valley of Wisconsin, and Woodman's carries Lifeway kefir. I think it's absolutely fantastic. We use it almost on a daily basis. We make our own cereal. You may have seen my Facebook post with my kids. We make something called a magic bowl. And that magic bowl starts with kefir or yogurts, which I'll talk about in a second. And then from there, we add frozen blueberries and other frozen fruits and fresh fruits and a variety of nuts and seeds and some honey and some sea salt, and it's absolutely amazing. I guarantee you it's better than any cereal on the planet. It even blows Lucky Charms away if you add enough honey. And when it comes to yogurts, same thing. All four of those rules need to apply. I have two favorites here. There's one that comes from the Alexandre family farm. Now this one might be a little harder to get, and you certainly might be able to get it in some grocery stores. We order it through a company. It's a online or catalog order company called Azure Standard, A-Z-U-R-E. They have some great products, and this is one of them. So the Alexandre Family Farm yogurt is the best out there that I have found, not only because it meets those four things that we talked about, but then also when it comes to casein in dairy, most people don't have as much of a lactose problem as they think they have. A lot of the allergies with dairy come from casein, and whether it's an A1 or an A2 casein. And without going into too much detail there, A2 is what you want. It comes from certain cows. It also comes from goats. It's why people that can't tolerate dairy from a cow can tolerate goat dairy. And so A2 casein is what Alexandre Family Farms uses. And then the one that's more commonly found in grocery stores, which is still great, is a brand called Maple Hill. So that's what you want to look for if you're looking for dairy. As always, don't get overwhelmed by all the information today. Just listen to this podcast again if you need to. Absorb it slowly, and that is part of the inspiration and educational takeaways as always. As we come to a close here, success equals simple habits performed daily over time. So incorporate these things slowly if you need to, simply, and look at the big picture. Don't look at how am I going to feel in a week? Why is my osteoporosis scan not better in a month? You're looking at the long term here. Success, simple habits performed daily over time. The second takeaway for today, do your own research on medications and then weigh the pros and cons. I talked about that enough, I think, but I can't stress that enough. Do your research, figure out what is the best decision for you. Don't make your decision based on fear and what you're told you should do. Number 3, start a resistance and jump training program today. Literally today, start something, YouTube it, just start jumping up and down if you can safely do that. Grab some bands, start doing some body weight squats. You don't have to overthink this. You don't have to join a gym. You don't have to hire a personal trainer. Start something today and make it part of your daily routine. Number 4, adequate protein is key. You have to get adequate protein. It makes up 50% of the bone, and if you're not getting adequate protein, it's going to be really difficult to build bone because it's 50% of the building blocks. And then whole food nutrition, making sure that you're getting all of those nutrients that are required to build bone in your body. Number 5, as always, remember you absolutely, positively are a leader, whether you see yourself as a leader or not. So if you enjoyed today's podcast and you found it beneficial, I want you to think about who needs to hear this message. Drop them a text. Tell them to check out the Foundational Health Podcast with Dr. Kevin Schultz, episode number 11, Osteoporosis. Until next time, make health your hobby. Thank you for listening to the Foundational Health Podcast. As always, if you would like to learn more about making health your hobby, visit our website at foundationalhealth365.com and follow me on Facebook at Kevin Schultz DC Foundational Health.